Hello and welcome to Islamic Awakening, a program that delves deeply into the issues affecting both Islam and Muslims today. I am your host, Ahmed Hanif. Today, I'm asking Professor Tariq Ramadan, what is jihad? Jihad is an Islamic term that is greatly misunderstood. The non-Muslims fearfully regard it as an Islamic practice that aims to wage holy war against all disbelievers, to convert them to Islam or to kill them. To the common Western mind, the word jihad is synonymous with terrorism, and Islam therefore is a militant religion. In recent times, the term jihad has been closely linked with takfiri groups such as ISIL. But many Muslim leaders have come out and condemned such groups as these, saying that events in Syria and Iraq are not jihad. So then, what is the true meaning of jihad and what isn't jihad?
Look, I think once again that as Muslims we have to come to these essential concepts, because there is no Islam without jihad, and there is no Islam without the deep understanding of this concept in our tradition. You can find scholars in both traditions, by the way. In the Shia tradition, Ja'far al-Sadiq was one of the first also who came with a synthesis of the concept of jihad. And you had on the other side, with the Sunni tradition, something which is clear. As-Suyuti wrote a book where he came with 80 different meanings of jihad. Only one of them has to do with armed resistance, al-qital, which is one type of jihad. So in fact, we need to understand the concept of jihad. Literally, it means to exert oneself. It has to do with an effort. But in fact, if you come deeply, and very often, you know, with this concept in Islam, take the spiritual side of it to understand the outward dimension of it. And in fact, we have something which is, we need, from the very moment we say that we believe in God, and that we say La ilaha illallah, there is no God but, no deity but God, and we acknowledge this, we understand that we go through an educational process. And this educational process is the spiritual struggle to make ourselves better. It's an inward reform. And this is jihad in-nafs, which the other word for it is tazkiyat in-nafs, is this purification of the self, meaning that we have in ourselves temptations and aspirations. قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها والنفس وما سواها. Allah, God, created ourselves with attractions towards what is good. ولكن الله حبب إليكم الإيمان. God made you love faith and beautified it in your heart. And at the same time, زين للناس حب شهوات. You are attracted by desires and instincts and things, and you are in between. This is a struggle. You have to make an effort. You have to it takes effort to reform yourself, and this is jihad. In fact, you understand that if you want to be at peace with yourself, you need to start with struggling with your own self. Your natural state is not a peaceful state. It's a state of tension. So you get something which is very deep here. In fact, jihad with your own self is not a way towards war or struggle. It's a way towards peace, which is exactly the same in our world, that you are dealing with people around you and some are going to oppress and to kill. You have to resist. So what you did with your own ego, you have to do it with people who are exploiting, killing. You have to resist, and then you have to transform. And
that would be the jihad asghar, the smaller jihad, wouldn't it?
So the point is that this hadith that we are talking about, the small, it's very often used by a Sufi tradition, is a weak hadith, but its teaching is a good one. Meaning by this that the most important jihad that you have to indulge in, that you have to experience, is the struggle with your own self, and you have to get this justice. Why justice is important? Because justice is a condition of peace. No justice, no peace with your own self. And this is why Adam and Hawa alayhi salam said, Allahumma zalamna anfusana. We have been unjust with our own self. If you don't help us and protect us, we are going to be lost. So this is a very important dimension. Now we come to our life in this world. And then what we have to understand is that they have multiple dimensions of jihad. And it starts with something which has to do with our heart, jihad al-qalb, which means purifying yourself, your mind. Allah, God gave us minds, intellects, bodies, hearts, and society, other people. Every single organ, every single dimension, every single space you need to indulge into a specific jihad. Not a violent one, but a one that is helping you to reform. You are not good per se, you become good out of education. Your fitra is good, but it could be covered. So fitra means this natural aspiration that you have towards the transcendence, towards something which is good, but it could be covered. So what we have to do is to struggle. So intellectual jihad means get knowledge, get it right, and try to reform your mind by getting this knowledge, because this is where there is no wisdom without knowledge. There are two terms that are in contradiction. There is a contradiction in terms. Ignorance and wisdom don't go together. Right. So on the other, so there is here an intellectual jihad. So yes, in our societies, the Muslim majority countries, we have something which is really sad, is to see the level of illiteracy that we have. Is that how come this could be called a Muslim majority society, where you have ignorance, you don't have a school system, you don't have education. So this is the first jihad that we need when it comes to intellect. And then you have social jihad, when it comes to justice, to get employment, because this is... And
to create that system of where you have an educational system for
exactly,
people.
Exactly, and to get your dignity. So, for example, what is my basic right as a human being? To eat, to drink, and to get a home. Any society which is not providing this for me, it's against justice, and I need to be involved in a jihad to reform this for the society, for the better. So this is something else. And then sometimes what you have in history, because it happened, is that you have people exploiting and killing and colonizing. So you have to resist. You have to resist with the best means possible, which is non-violence. But if they are using weapons, you should resist by the means they use. And this is why Nelson Mandela was right, by saying, you know what, it's not the victims that are choosing the means of their resistance. It's the oppressors.
The victimizers. Yeah.
It's the oppressors. The oppressors are using weapons. You have to resist. And we know in history very often, you know, people they are saying, "Oh, we have to avoid violence." Yes, we have to avoid violence. But who is bringing violence now in our societies? Where, for example, there is, you know, something which is a kind of a violence without weapons, when people are starving, that the economic system is killing so many people. We have to resist this economic system by saying that's not humanity. This is not humanism. There is nothing right in this. And then sometimes you have people going to kill people, and you have to
defend yourself and so on.
Yes, and this is legitimate resistance. This is legitimate resistance. So there are sometimes means that you have to choose, because if not, without this means, you are going to disappear.
An idea came to me when you were talking that in a sort of a intermediate sense, as a crossover between, let's say, the external circumstances and the internal circumstances of the soul, which is that especially in the West, you would find that one of the major means whereby you can control people is through the consumer culture, for example. Have people chasing after the latest gadget or occupied with the latest songs, you know. And so people inwardly are being programmed by the environment for them not to wake up to their power of changing themselves. So would you, or could you include then, for the internal jihad, the purification of the self from the programming and propaganda of the oppressive environment that people might be living in.
Yes, and I think it's important because it gives us a broad understanding of the meaning of jihad. Because in fact, as we are talking about, in fact, resisting what is bad and reforming for what is good is a liberating process. And the first liberation is the liberation from your ego. And the world culture today is working with our instincts, our emotions, in fact, putting us in a jail called superficial freedom. That's the reality of it. So you need to come to the spiritual understanding here, is how am I going to liberate myself? You know, in Surah Yusuf, there is something which is very interesting. Yusuf, a woman was trying to attract him, to seduce him. And he said, no, السجن أحب إلي. Prison is better for me than what you are calling me to. And in fact, he was saying, your prison is my freedom.
Right.
I'm freeing myself from my ego because I can't be attracted. So I master myself, I control myself. So put me in your material jail, I will get my spiritual freedom. So this is the jihad we are talking about when it comes to consumers. And you know what? If Muslims were to talk that language, this could be universal because all the people are exactly understanding what I mean here. They say, yes, of course, we know that we are in jail. We know that any type of addiction is jail.
Yes.
And any addiction means in Islam, jihad.
Right.
Go for it. Liberate yourself from any type of addiction. And this is the very meaning of Tawheed. Now we have to bring this understanding of this liberating process to the collective side, to the real, the outward reality by saying, look, I'm not going to keep quiet. In the name of principles, in the name of justice, because I want peace, I'm not going to accept your exploitation. I'm not going to accept what you are doing by all the means and non-violent means that I'm using. And this is where it's very subtle here, and we have to make it clear, because you are talking about, you know, the takfiri and all these groups that are using Islam, using the same, you know, logic that I'm expressing right now, but distorting the whole meaning. And these are Muslims who can tell you, and it's a very difficult concept, takfiri. Why? Because these are Muslims saying, we are Muslims and you are not. They are putting people, they have no right to do it, but they are putting Muslims outside Islam because they don't share their views, not only on religion, but their political views. And we had this in the very long tradition. Al-Khawarij, these were people that were acting like this. They are putting you outside Islam.
Isn't this a kind of a way to silence critical thinking? For example, you have other voices, other opinions that also claim to be Islamic, and these takfiri groups, by making them infidels, is actually creating the inner environment for people who follow them not to listen to other points of view within Islam.
Exactly, that's one thing, but it's deeper than that even. It's a narrow-minded approach to Al-Quran and our tradition. And we have an accepted diversity in Islam. And they say, you know what, we are the only saved group. Al-Firqa al-Najiyah. You are all outside Islam. This is first literalism, narrowing the scope of our message, and then arrogance. And then more than that, then coming to act or to behave in a way which has nothing to do with Islam. So we need also to say, this way of talking about jihad, of jihadism, has nothing to do with jihad.
Which brings me, Which brings me to the other point where you're actually leading into. How do you counter the perception of Islam being a violent religion?
By explaining all these dimensions is, once again, you know, saying all these occurrences of jihad, and only one is about, it's about qital, and saying, in fact, is a defensive attitude that you have. You are attacked and you respond. And you respond because you have in the Quran a very important verse. وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ لَفَسَدَتِ الْأَرْضُ. If God has not put people resisting the oppression of others, the earth would have been corrupt. Meaning, there are tensions and you have to stand up. You don't let the people take over in the name of their desires, their power or money or exploitation of lands. You have to resist. So this is where, as Muslims, we are on the side of the universal message of humanity, say it's right to resist. Come to Europe, come to the States. They all celebrate the people who resisted oppression in the name of their dignity at the national level, at the continental level. For example, when the Nazis were in Europe, the people who resisted, these are the people who are the dignity of the country. And exactly the same in the United States of America, the people who said, no, in my country, I'm a Swiss citizen. The Swiss citizen who said no to the government resisting the oppression or the killing of the Jews were the dignity, saying, no, I'm not going to do what you are saying. And we had Muslims in Europe protecting the Jews by making wrong contracts or conversion just to protect them. Muslims did this to support their dignity. So we need to.
So now you're universalizing jihad. Jihad is not just as a principle something rooted in Islam, but it is also something rooted in the very nature of humanity itself.
Exactly. It has to do with our fitra, even with the humanity. Let me tell you something. You know, we were in Mauritius Island. This was 20 years ago, and we launched with Buddhists, Chinese, Confucianists, Christians. We launched a jihad against poverty. Exactly, against poverty. Come together and they say, oh wow, this is not what we were thinking about jihad. Come together against poverty. A jihad against racism, all racism. It's against Arabs or against black people or against Jews or against Muslims. We don't accept. This is the big jihad we are talking about.
You can include then, from what you're saying, you can include non-Muslims within the context of together with Muslims fighting a jihad.
Any resistance for the sake of justice, human dignity, and equality is a jihad, and this could be done with non-Muslims. We don't have this kind of let us Muslims struggle against all the other. This is the narrow understanding, and it's wrong. And more importantly, it's a jihad of education. We even need in our communities jihad of love. We need to talk much more about love. Let's the people come together and say, okay, our resistance is what is brotherhood, sisterhood. This is what we need. We are completely obsessed with a very narrow understanding, rules. No, that's not us. That's not Islam. This is a very wrong interpretation of Islam. So we have to open up. And then at the same time, we should be clear enough to say, to all the people who are killing in the name of Islam and killing innocent people and killing, by the way, the victims of Muslims are much more Muslims than people of other faiths. This is what is happening in Syria, in Iraq, in Africa, and we have to say, no, that will never be us. And in the name of our religion, coming from and listening to the Prophet, peace be upon him, we are going to stand up and to say, no, we are not going. And we will be allying ourselves with people of other faith against you in the name of justice, as long as our goals are the same: justice, dignity, freedom. This is where we are as Muslims.
Going back to this Mauritius jihad that you had with the Confucians and so on, you actually used the word jihad for people to come together?
It was a big, a big call for the people, and said the people were, and some say, oh, is it not a provocation? I say, no, it's for you to understand the very meaning. And this is where also in many books I was talking about social jihad. I was talking about educational jihad, and this is exactly the understanding. يجاهدون بأموالهم وأنفسهم. With your money and with your own self, you are struggling for justice. So this is where at the end you make it clear: jihad is for the sake of peace, never for the sake of war.
And it's for everybody.
It's for everybody.
Now, wouldn't that be a great idea for us to maintain the use of the word jihad? But let's say, for example, Muslims in the West, and you're calling for, let's say, for everybody to join in a jihad against racism, for example. In this way, you could actually, bring back the positive aspect of jihad within a non-Muslim context, no?
Yes,
like
I completely agree. We did it in Mauritius. This is the word I'm using everywhere in the West, by making clear that we are resisting. And, there was a priest in France saying, I'm at war with poverty. Yes, we are at war with poverty.
Right.
We are not at war with terrorism,
Right.
as it was said in the United States. We are at war with illiteracy. We are at war with injustice. We are at war with racism. This is where we have to come together. And the struggle is not over. And this is the very meaning of faith. How is your faith being seen by the people around you? Through your words? No. Your commitment. And your added value is always to be courageous enough to come with this understanding. And you are talking about, media and entertainment and consumerist culture. This is where we need to say, how am I going to get my freedom? Because freedom, it's out of resistance. There is no freedom without jihad. There is no justice without jihad, and there is no peace without jihad. If we understand this from an Islamic perspective, and we are able for ourselves, because my point is not to please the West or to please the non-Muslims,
Right.
is to educate Muslims first, is to come with this deep understanding that we have to understand our religion in such a way. Why? Because we see now young Western Muslims or Muslims in Muslim majority countries going to what they call jihad and putting all the world outside Islam and thinking that they are the only safe people. These people are dangerous.
What's the reason for this? What's the fundamental cause for young Muslims doing this?
I would say three things. The first one is a very superficial understanding of Islam. They don't get it. That's wrong. The second is frustration. Because we said this, the perception of Islam is very bad. So say, okay, the only way I'm going to get a value is by having it's us versus them, which is wrong. It's us with justice against them, the unjust, not all the other people. So this is the second, frustration. And the third one, I would say, it has to do with the mindsets. We need to get this right, is that we have dogmatic minds. You can be very knowledgeable or ignorant and being dogmatic. And dogmatic is to look at the world through only one dimension. If I'm right, I'm sorry for you, you are wrong. And this is not Islamic.
And it goes back to what you were talking about in terms of the importance of the intellectual aspect and penetrating the deeper meanings of the meaning of jihad in this particular context.
Yes, and the intellectual jihad is to be able to say at the same time, I might be right and you might be right, so I may be wrong. So the intellectual jihad starts with this humility with your own truth and listening to others, and there you go for justice, and you go for, once again, the final goal of Islam is salam. Peace. No peace without resistance.
Which is equilibrium.
Exactly.
And one of the things I think that we could take away from here is that jihad is so universal that it can even include in its practice those people who are not Muslims. I want to thank you very much. Okay. That was quite an educational experience for us. Sadly, we have run out of time. I'd like to thank Professor Tariq Ramadan and, of course, all of you at home for watching. Until next time and another edition of Islamic Awakening, it's a goodbye from me and the whole team. Take care.